No, but they're self-isolating I know they're in there, yet they just disturb us all.
Everybody's available at the moment.
So. Yeah.
But isn't the gig now that you can do this contactless deliveries and they just leave your on the door?
Yeah, they should be doing.
Yeah, you want to have a word with them, Jamie. You want to go around there, tell them they're. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Week 2 of us having to do it remotely, and the first week in which the whole country's been pretty much locked down. I think last week it was still optional, and now if you're out, some drone is going to report you to the police or something like that. So everyone's really locked down. I still managed to have one or two sort of successful trips to the supermarket this week. I don't know about you guys. I saw Jamie, you put up a tweet with some bog roll you to get hold of. So congratulations there, mate.
It's bad around here.
Yeah.
It's bad around here. We're pretty empty still in a lot of the supermarkets. So you have to go further afield to get things. It's hard to get beer now, which is not good.
Hard to get what?
Beer. Not really essential, but
I'm going to have to rub your nose in it then. Sorry, mate.
Unbelievable.
And it's Camden Pale as well.
Jesus. I could do with one of those now.
Well, quite. That's why I thought I'd taunt you. Pasta is still thin on the ground. I don't know if that's related to the fact that Italy was so hard hit. But I can't see pasta anywhere, man.
I think it's just because it's easy to cook, isn't it? And it lasts forever. So people think
for rice. I've got enough rice to last me the reft of my life now, thanks to going to Costco.
People always cock up rice when they cook it. So whereas pasta, you can't really go wrong. You put a sauce on it. Yeah.
So and how are you guys been before we get onto the actual telecom stuff? How are you finding the lockdown? Everything under control?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get used to the kids being around all the time, which has made things a bit difficult. Our place is quite small, so it's sort of hard to get away from them. But I mean, this might even work out in a positive way for my older one because he's not super good at exams, and because they're now sort of heavily emphasising coursework at the school he's at. Which he is quite good at. He's looking like he might do better in his GCSEs than he would have done.
Okay.
I'm trying to look at the positive sides of this, which that's potentially one of them. And my younger one just thinks he should be on permanent holiday now and not have to do anything anymore apart from squirt water pistols in the garden. So, but we're all healthy.
Not enjoying the homeschooling. She pretty bitterly resents it.
Yeah, we've got that. Yeah, very much. But I'm healthy and they are, and I hope you guys are too, obviously. So on that front, things are good.
Cool. Okay. Well, I was just texting someone else I know in the industry and saying there's going to be an almighty piss up when this stuff blows over.
God,
people are going to go out hard, so that could be fun. All right. I've got to do my little bits and bobs. So what we're going to chat about today, first and foremost, is there's no escaping the only news story in the world right now. But we'll have another look at how that's affecting the industry more from a business point of view rather than a sort of network capacity point of view. And there'll be there are other sort of stories and semi-related things to do with the old coronavirus. I've taken to just writing "cause of coronavirus." It's COZ in my story because I just find myself referring to it so often. And then we're going to chat a little bit coronavirus related. The cancellation of Mobile World Congress, that was a bit contentious, as we've chatted about plenty of times on the pod, regarding how much cash, if any, exhibitors and attendees were going to get. And the GSMA has made its offer this week, so we'll have a little chat about that. And then lastly, the big kit vendors, or at least two of them, still keep going on about how good they are at filing 5G patents. And I wrote an analysis piece from chatting to a few people about whether or not that matters at all. So we'll chatting about that. And just to remind you that if you're watching this on the site or on YouTube or on Facebook, you can listen to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and loads of other platforms. Right, so good old coronavirus, because of coronavirus. That's going to be my hashtag. I think I'm going to start by chucking the ball over to Jamie, because he's written, well, several pieces, but a couple of analysis pieces spring to mind, particularly this one at the starting of the week, looking at who might benefit business-wise from the exceptional circumstances they're in. And then you wrote one more recently about, I think, operators particularly and some of the challenges, business challenges they're facing. So I'll hand it over to you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really to add to what I said last week about the who's benefiting. I mean, it's obviously a couple of key industries that are sort of less obvious than the actual sort of like the online shopping market, supermarkets, for instance, like Ocado, which is clearly benefiting. But obviously, the guys like the cloud companies are going to be scaling their operations rapidly as more customers want to shift workloads into the cloud to compensate for companies with their employees working from home. I think one of the interesting elements from this week, which has been emerging, is the financial impact of coronavirus on the telcos. Now, in the short term, it means very, very little, and some may presume that increased dependence on the network and traffic would mean more money, but obviously money and internet traffic are completely unrelated. There's with more sort of unlimited tariffs, and it's completely redundant nowadays. But one thing which could have a very, very big impact, especially over the next sort of couple of months, is less income from roaming. So in particular, London, the south coast of France, south coast of Spain, the Italians, the major Italian cities, and Portugal. These are companies and local economies which are hugely driven by tourism. International customers you have coming into your business, the more termination fees a lot of these telcos are collecting year on year. So this, although it's not a massive part of the business, it will put a significant dent in the profitability because it is just lost revenue. Ultimately, I think it entirely depends how long this carries on. If you can sort it out in the summer, people will start going on holidays again. People are saving money, presuming you're keeping your job. People are saving money, so you will have something to spend over the summer. So there is potential for postponed or delayed revenues. But this, if it carries on throughout the summer and towards the end of the year with more business trips being cancelled and holidays, that is just lost, irrecoverable revenue, which could put quite a dampener on the industry.
Yeah, and Ian, we got a specific example of it that I think you wrote about recently. Was it Telia in?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Tell us about that.
I mean, their result. Then they've sort of been one of a small number of companies to sort of have come out with a kind of warning, like a profit warning, because of COVID-19, as we all call it now. But kind of very much echoing what Jamie just said. Like one of the risk areas that they've identified is the roaming business. And I also noticed there's a bit of research that's come out today. Actually, a company called Juniper I've been aware of for a long time, saying quite alarmingly, actually, in the worst case scenario, you could be looking at about $25 billion in roaming revenues disappearing over the next 9 months, which is about half of what I think the whole industry makes over a year. So and that's those revenues represent about 6% of total sort of operator billed revenues. So you're talking about sort of 3% dip if that worst case scenario comes about. But the other thing Telia is flagging up is a big problem at its TV and media business. So they were expecting that to be fairly profitable and earnings before EBITDA level this year, and they're now saying it could might not even break even or just about break even. And the reason is, although everybody's sitting at home watching TV and usage online services is up, there's been quite a big drop in advertising revenues already, which I think some of the internet companies also flagged this week. Facebook and Twitter alerted investors to that. So that a lot of the revenues they make come from that. The other issue is sports content. There's not a lot of sporting events, and there's no sporting events happening. I think, in fact, it's pretty much all of them are now cancelled for the next few months. So there's an impact on pay TV stuff they make on that side. And they're kind of saying they don't exactly know how bad things are at the moment because we just don't know how long this is going to go on for. But obviously, the longer the restrictions are in place, the worse the situation could be. A couple of other things highlighted were issues on the health of staff, and not only staff but also suppliers and customers for that matter, and just sort of disruption to the supply chain, which we talked about a few times. They can't. Carrying out network upgrades and doing that sort of thing might be something that companies want to see happening at the moment if there's a lot of pressure on networks and there's a lot of increased usage. But
and I think Bojo has already turned around and said that he expects work to continue over this period. In particular, full fibre deployments. City Fibre were chirping out, saying that they've been given the green light to carry on with their construction of their network. But then I'm presuming that the other telcos have been given the same instructions, carry on rolling out, because number one, we're depending on it now, and it'll accelerate the bounce back when when the pandemic is over.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that they're not going to be allowed to do it, because they'll be designated key workers. In fact, I think they already are. It's more if there is some kind of impact on staff health, that could slow things down. If there are supply chain constraints because of what's going on, that could slow things down. And if the operators are kind of having to capex cuts because of the sort of thing that is alerted everybody to, then that could. So another company, Chorus, actually in New Zealand, which is a little bit better known than it used to be because it's sort of linked with the whole Huawei discussion in New Zealand about whether you should be using that particular company. But they also came out with a statement today saying they were cutting their capex this year because of COVID-19. So they're sort of cutting some of the expenditure that they had planned on broadband rollout.
We're using a different platform, and I was struggling to unmute myself for a second.
I'm getting a few gaps occasionally, but
yeah,
I don't know if it's my headphones or not, or it's the.
I think it's just the remoteness. There's going to be little bits of latency, and then there's going to be me not working out how to unmute my thing. He's just gone on Twitter and said he's got the old coronavirus.
Who has?
Boris Johnson. Did
Yes.
you see that?
I saw it this morning. Yeah.
So fingers crossed.
Unfortunately, yeah. So there are a few telco executives who've caught it as well. So I think BT's boss Philip Janssen and Dave Dawson, if I remember rightly, is another one. I think
no. They all just self-isolated. They didn't.
Oh, they've self-isolated. Okay, right.
So Janssen said that he caught it, but this was about 3 or 4 days after all the CEOs and the representatives from DCMS were in a meeting to to sign the shared rural network agreement. So all 4 of the CEOs went into self-isolation as a precaution, but then the DCMS minister, the infrastructure minister, and the Secretary of State for Digital, both of them decided that it was below them and neither of them would go into self-isolation for some reason.
A bit like not Boris Johnson, Donald Trump. Then hasn't he?
Basically,
he's not doing it, even though he was in contact with people who've caught it. But
didn't he say he got tested and he's all right?
Right.
Anyway, but the best case scenario, just getting onto the sort of epidemiology of it for a sec, is for people to get a little dose, get over it, because then in principle, don't quote me on this, in principle they're then immune and they can just get on with stuff.
Yeah, that's the hope, isn't it? That you get it and you can still function and then you're back on your feet. And if a majority of the population's in that position, then we're hopefully coming out of this at some point.
Yeah, they just cancelled download, man. we booked 3 days. We're spending 3 nights at Download. We even got a little hut. We were going to VIP it, and they just cancelled that. So that's really gutting. So yeah, I think. But as you say, you know, if all these people get a little dose and they get over it, you know, maybe no one reckons. I mean, everyone's written off April pretty much, haven't they? But maybe we get to May, and all the graphs are going in the right direction. That's what we're crossing our fingers about, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, more positive stuff, actually, back to the sort of telecom side of it. It's worth flagging up. Today I wrote a story. Vodafone announced that they were offering free unlimited mobile broadband to anyone that identifies as vulnerable. They presumably got some kind of government list or NHS list of people who are down as vulnerable, which includes people with sort of health complaints and that sort of thing. And then also the first 500,000 people who apply for it through their little reward scheme. Now, and they also said that if they hit 500,000 and the network's still looking all right, they'll look at extending it. And I think, I just think fair play to them on that. I mean, hopefully it won't take too much of a toll on their network, because presumably everyone's on Wi-Fi nearly all the time because they're locked inside. But I think it's a good gesture to do. I wouldn't be surprised to see other operators follow it. And it's just in keeping, you know, we had last night this thing where everyone at 8 p.m. came and sort of clapped the NHS. I think in keeping with the spirit of that and the general sense that everyone's got of like, okay, this is big, we're all together. I think for most people, their normal day-to-day stuff, their tribalism, their little bugbears are put aside, and you get a sort of general sense of everyone just saying, all right, let's get through this, and then we can get back to hassling each other on social media and all that sort of thing. And it's good to see industry pitching in with things like that from Vodafone. So fair play to them on that one.
Yeah. Isn't it just coming back to the usage issue? But what you just got about, you know, most of the traffic now going on Wi-Fi, and because everybody's at home, obviously, isn't it now the when it comes to mobile networks specifically, it's more on the voice side of things that there are starting to be some problems. Yeah, from what I've been reading.
Yeah, I've read that, yeah. Because everyone's just chatting a lot more.
Everyone's chatting, and your phones might not be set up to go over Wi-Fi calling necessarily. I think you have to actually sort of activate that, and it might. I don't know how that service is, but if everybody's defaults to their mobile phone in their house anyway, then all of a sudden you've got this tremendous surge in voice traffic. Whereas the data is not really something we have to worry about, because as we've seen, companies like BT are saying they can cope with so much more than they're already seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if many people bothered with Wi-Fi calling. I remember writing about it a few years ago, like it was a big deal. But I could never really see the point, because most people, as you point out, until now, most people are calling. So voice calling, that is. So most people won't have bothered. I guess if the operators want to be clever about it, they should directly communicate with their customers and go, look, click here to activate Wi-Fi calling, and then you're laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing, actually, I should mention about the operators in the UK that I wrote about earlier on in the week. There was like an emergency text message that the government said when they announced the full lockdown. There's a text that said, coronavirus alert, new rules enforced now. You must stay at home, or you're in deep shit. No, they didn't say that. But that was sent over all the mobile networks, but with their sort of cooperation. What there wasn't was a dedicated emergency public communication system, and they looked into it like 2012, 2013, and either just didn't get around to it, or I think they thought it was a bit pricey. And to be honest, the fact that they're able to send that thing out through all the networks anyway kind of vindicates their decision not to bother. Because then, you know, why create a whole parallel network when it's not that difficult to get the network operators to cooperate in times of need anyway? Thinks that there's a sort of counter argument that there should be a dedicated public address system for mobiles.
Yeah,
I'll take that as a no. So that's just another example of everyone clubbing together on that one, and I think that's good. And I think we're going to see more. You know, you're seeing other stuff. A thing I wrote about this week. We mustn't suspend our scrutiny of how things are run. So across Europe, I've written about this, Jamie. I believe you wrote about it as well. There are measures being put into place to use anonymized data to track people. And you sort of think, yeah, fair enough. If that's a good way of tracking the spread, seeing where there are hotspots, having some warning of areas where you should quarantine and that will take other sort of precautionary measures, that will make sense. But it is also an encroachment into the forced use of our personal data that we probably wouldn't have stood for in normal circumstances. So the civil liberties side of things is getting quite contentious. There's been a few little anecdotal things. What was it? Derbyshire police put up this tweet where there were some people taking their dog for a walk on some moors, like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, annotated going, this isn't necessary. And it was very, very big brotherish, and we're watching you. And it's like,
Yeah.
A dog for a walk, man. Calm down.
Well, I thought that was allowed anyway. I mean, I think people are getting confused about what is and what isn't allowed, because we were told you're allowed to take a day, you know, it's a daily stroll or go for a dog or whatever. Now, I don't really see what the harm is in doing it in the Peak District just because you happen to live away. I mean, you're in your car driving. Obviously, we don't want everybody on the roads, but you're pretty safe in a car. I'm guessing, certainly.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
More so than in a supermarket. But I mean, the point about surveillance, I think, and all the which I also wrote about. I noticed The Economist did a big briefing on it as well today. I haven't read it in detail, but I think there's a concern that the state is obviously growing massively at the moment. It's having to step in and take a much bigger role than it ever has, and particularly in the UK, where we've got these very generous sort of deals offered to now the self-employed, but also to workers. You know, offering a sort of fairly big safety net there. Not always the sort of thing you've associated with Tory governments in the past, but they've kind of become one of the most socialist governments we've ever seen, almost. But
all of a sudden,
there is some concern about whether this remains after the situation passes. I think if you look at history, whenever the state's grown during a time of crisis, it always tends to take a long time for it to kind of start to retrench again. So I think it's a valid concern. It sounds that it's a hard thing to say, isn't it? To say you shouldn't be using you should be careful about how you use mobile technology to track people, because we need to be worried about civil liberties, because everybody's just going to go, well, this is far more important, you know, the priority of 19. But I think we do have to be aware of a situation several months' time, maybe, where hopefully this is all not forgotten, but certainly it's in the past. And maybe in some country we've got a sort of surveillance system that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with. Yeah,
100%. As ever, emergency powers are easy to generate, but they tend to be reluctant to give them up after, even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and they say, well, we can't be sure the emergency's over. It's something we got to keep an eye on. But yeah, you know, I'm the biggest libertarian ever, but even I'm suspending that right now. I'm going, look, fair enough, shit's got to get done. But yes, I think it's right that everyone keeps an eye on it. Okay, I think we sort of covered the explicit sort of coronavirus effect on the industry angle. And so I'm going to move on to the GSMA and the cancelled Mobile World Congress. I'm going to remind myself of the precise terms they came out with. But basically, for background, they gave the impression about a month ago when it was cancelled that it was just going to be strict terms and conditions from the contract for both attendees, i.e. people paying just to turn up, and exhibitors, i.e. people with stands. That basically they were going to get nothing back because the terms and conditions addressed force majeure or whatever it is that we call it. Saying, you know, it's an act of God, it's not our problem, sorry, tough luck. And it was always felt that while they are technically within their rights to take the action, there are several reasons why it would be a bad idea. There's just the pure goodwill side of it. There's also the fact that a lot of people might get so disenchanted that they don't bother going back to the event. And you know, and there's just the sense that, as I said earlier, we're all in it together. And if people have got to take a financial hit, then we should try and spread it evenly. Anyway, to have seen sense, and they've come up with a deal which basically says smaller exhibitors, so spending up to £5 can get a full refund, and larger exhibitors can get half of the money back, capped at 150 grand. Neither of those qualify, however, if they cancelled before the show was cancelled, which is the one big criticism that people have had of it. Because of course people cancel for the same reason that the show cancelled, which is the coronavirus, and they were protecting their own employees. So that's the one big criticism. And then there's an option B if you don't want to just get some cash back, which would definitely be applied to those really big exhibitors for which 150 grand is still a drop in the ocean. Which is that if you come back next year, you get a credit of 65% of the fees you paid this year. Come back the year after, you get a further 35%. And if you come back the year after that, i.e. 2023, you get another 25%, making a grand total of a fees credit of 125%, which I thought was fairly generous. So I'll ask Jamie first. I know we all voiced an opinion on this. What did you think of GSMA?
I thought it was fairly reasonable. I think the difference is I don't think as many people disqualified themselves from the cash rebate as you think. Mainly because publicly stating that you're not going to attend is not the same as cancelling. You know, I can say that I can book a cinema ticket and say I'm not going to go, but I still own that ticket and I haven't actually cancelled the ticket with the actual provider. So the only people who have disqualified themselves are the ones who have had a conversation with the GSMA and cancelled the contract. Otherwise, I can't see how the GSMA can turn around and say, you know, you don't qualify for this. I think they've on very shaky legal grounds. But ultimately, I think it's a good initiative. People aren't irrelevant of how big the company is. People aren't going to stop going to Mobile World Congress. So as long as you can survive this year financially, which I imagine most of them can, you're gonna be fine, and it's working out like a good deal. You know, 125% spread over 3 years. Most accountants would be happy with that.
What about you, Ian? What's your take?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's fairly generous, actually, and I think the cash side of it is maybe a little bit irrelevant anyway. I mean, I can't see lots of other events being cancelled. I don't think it's lost its status as the most important industry event because of what's going on. You know, and if this all gets behind us, as we hope it does in a few weeks' time, then I don't see that companies are going to not want to be there next year. So I think that the option B to get the discount is the one that I'm pretty sure almost everybody would go for that. I'd be very surprised if companies go, right, we want a cash refund, and you know, so I think it's a generous. I mean, it's a bit of a financial hit for them, you know, and you kind of wonder what that means for sort of restructuring at that organisation potentially. The other risk, I guess, which is being quite pessimistic and gloomy, but is that it kind of we have the same situation next year. You know, if there is some concern that we kind of see a slight improvement in the summer, because we usually do get some kind of improvement in things like flu and colds during that period, but then you get a sort of second wave of it coming in the winter, which would obviously be disruptive again next year, and it's unlikely we're going to have a vaccine by then. So that's the real concern. But that's a really sort of gloomy thing to say, and let's that doesn't happen. On the whole, I think it's a pretty generous deal that they've offered.
One thing I'll add about I like you, Ian, assumed that nearly everyone would go for option 2.
Yeah.
Given that they were almost certain to go all 3 years anyway. That they get to recoup all their losses and then some. But I did chat to one exhibiting vendor off the record, so I won't name them, and they said they were going for option 1, and the reason is the stated reason was to invest in marketing activities this year to make up for all the marketing they haven't been able to do because of the cancellation of Mobile World Congress. And they didn't state this, but I suppose another reason might be, you know, everyone's going to be pretty bloody cash flow constrained because of what's going on. And, you know, if they can even get like 100 grand back, that might be pretty handy. So I think one thing that reminded me not to underestimate how, you know, on what a sort of annual cycle business tends to operate. and the overriding priorities are to rescue something from this year, given that the cost of attending Mobile World Congress is already priced into their overheads for coming years. So that's just another way of looking at it. But yeah. Overall value for money, there's much better value for money to got from option 2.
I mean, I don't know who you spoke to, obviously, Scott, but I'd imagine it's a fairly small company. I could see smaller companies perhaps thinking.
I'd say middling in the great scheme.
I can guess who it is, and if they are doing that, they've got a pretty Mickey Mouse business model, to be perfectly honest. Because realistically, you say that they're trying to do additional marketing activities. Well, I mean, I'm presuming they're executives and they would be flying all over the place over the last 2 months and the next 3 or 4 months. Well, that's actually money saved, which can be reinvested. So if they're collecting 100,000 back, they're probably saving 50 grand on the flights, hotels, and expenses that have been that they can't make use of over a 3 to 4 month period. So whoever that is, and I'm pretty sure I know who it is. It sounds very.
Well, I haven't told you, so you're guessing.
Yeah, well, it's Mickey Mouse.
We'll call it Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, and to the company,
Mickey Mouse Networks.
Yeah. The company, I know who you are, and I thought better of you than that feeble excuse.
Strong words, Jamie. So yeah, well, you know, I don't disagree with what you say, but I also assume that their accountants and senior execs have crunched the numbers and it makes sense for them. So, you know,
I think that's a reason they're saying I don't believe it. It doesn't add up.
All right, I'll leave it there. But yeah, credit where it's due to GSMA. We were happy to criticize them when it looked like they weren't going to do right by their partners at the event, and they are now. So that's all groovy. And the overwhelming, you know, over and above one company I spoke to, there's one other company that I quoted in the article, and the sense I get is that most people are pleasantly surprised that they stand to get anything back at all. So jolly good. Right, and yeah, the final segment I wanted to talk about is what I call patent pissing competitions. Oh, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say, has Jamie completely frozen? Because he looks like he's had the same expression on his face for about half an hour.
No,
right.
Yeah, he's moved.
There's a delivery coming in.
Okay.
It's for our next door neighbours who are being complete twats at the moment.
What, they're just sending all their deliveries to you?
They keep putting, you know, if we're not available, deliver to number 16. No, but they're self-isolating so I know they're in there. Yet they just disturb us all.
Everybody's available at the moment. So.
Yeah.
But isn't the gig now that you can do this contactless deliveries and they just leave on the door?
Yeah, they should be doing.
Yeah, you want to have a word with them, Jamie. You want to go around there, tell them that. So yes, talking about twats. No. Patent pissing competitions, as I call them, which is a company goes, look, we filed loads of patents, and the inference is that makes us great. And you know, you see a lot of this going on with the vendors. Huawei flagged up the fact that they filed the most patents at the European Patent Office in 2019 by quite some way. Nokia this week sent out a press release going, look, we've done 3,000 patent declarations. I still don't know, having looked into it, why that's different from a filing or whatever.
I think a declaration is a filing.
Right.
So they could declared intent to secure a patent, but they might be going through the process or in a contentious position with someone else who's filing a very, very similar patent.
Yeah, just a different shade of blue. Yeah, well, quite. And so you've identified perfectly one of my bugbears with all this, which is the sort of slipperiness of the language. And I think it's often when they make announcements, I think it's quite deliberate. I think they're going for a little bit of cheap PR one-upmanship by inferring a greater sort of R&D capability than is actually warranted by just filing loads of patents. I mean, in principle, it's not difficult to file a patent. You can do it on the back of a fag packet and just chuck it into the office on Monday morning. Actually getting the patent granted is another matter. And then furthermore, the quality of the patent and how standard essential it is another matter. As I was just going to say, Ericsson hasn't really, I'm sure they've done it in the past, but they haven't recently issued such a press release. But I asked them, what their thoughts were on the matter. They pointed me to a blog post which said, well, if you measure patents in this way, it turns out Ericsson's the best, which seems to further prove my point. And that they're all going to.
Funny that Ericsson says they're the best.
Yeah, well, quite. That's exactly it.
The company that's hemorrhaging cash and not doing very well, but they're the best.
Are they hemorrhaging cash?
Well, over the last couple of years, I mean, yeah, there's gone through 3 CEOs in 5 years.
They're doing all right at the moment, but yeah.
Nah,
I think
Jamie's got the arsehole with everyone this afternoon.
I think it's just all this stuff's all kind of willy waving, isn't it? It's and there's this. I think I wrote about it a little while ago in a story I did about this bird and bird study, saying that the main conclusion was that a lot of these reports and studies and measurements and ratings and rankings, they don't really, they don't really tell you anything, because as you've just been saying, a declaration's a declaration. There's not any kind of commonly agreed thing on what standard essential patent really is. Kind of independent monitor saying this is more important than this, and this one isn't particularly important. So it's, you can read into these things what you will, and you can produce ones that show Huawei way out in front. You can produce ones that show Ericsson in front, and it doesn't really tell you the story about who's ahead in the 5G race, which is what they're kind of putting press releases out for to try and prove. So
it's largely redundant, because if you have a look at, it's like, let's take the Nokia business as an example. They've got a technologies and a licensing business unit, so they make money off royalties and license fees. So if they were any good, that division would be as big as Qualcomm. Now, how much money does Qualcomm make each year just from having a ridiculously good R&D department, a really, really good salesman farming out licenses, and also a very good legal department at suing people? That's a patent business, and that's actually developing valuable patents. That's, not all patents are created equal, and
Definitely.
these companies, you look at how much money they make year on year to how valuable that patent actually is. And Qualcomm have the most valuable ones.
They're the only ones that are able to do that. They have a calculation that they apply for what they charge in terms of, and I think they use the overall sort of price of the device rather than, and therefore this allows them to kind of extract. People are prepared to pay it, which, and you ask people in the industry about that, and I had conversations about it. I can't quote who they are, and they say, their technology is really good. People are prepared to pay them the money, but they're kind of a sort of
Apple.
They're an exceptional case, except Apple,
and that didn't turn out so well for them, did it?
No.
Yeah, and then another interesting thing I found when I was researching it is, where is the patent filed? Where's the application made? So it looks like Europe's considered the gold standard for sort of patent rigor, i.e., we'll really look into it and only grant the patent if it ticks a lot of boxes. And it looks like Huawei does a hell of a lot of its patent filing in China. Now, I don't know, I don't know anywhere enough about the Chinese patent filing system to know whether that's in any way inferior, but it is unusual for an international company not to file their patents in Europe or the US. For example, Korean companies nearly all file their patents in Europe and the US, not Korea. So then if Huawei's filing half its patents in China, you sort of, why is it doing that?
But didn't Huawei come out and say that they had a statement, didn't they, recently about filings in Europe, and were claiming that they had more than anybody else? I think.
Yeah, that was the original thing I was referring to. But that was all patents. That wasn't just like 5G patents.
No, I know.
I should have said that's what I was referring to just now, specifically 5G patents. Their thing was all patents, and let's not forget, as we've chatted about in recent pods, Huawei's involved in all sorts of bits and bobs.
Yeah.
So a grand total of all their patent filings is not a like for like comparison with like Ericsson, which is a 5G specialist or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, you know,
well, it's like comparing R&D spending between these companies. You know, it's which people have also done. And now there's no doubt what Huawei spends, and I think they were even saying this week they're going to spend about 20 billion this year or something. Is huge compared with what Ericsson and Nokia spend. But you do have to remember they are a bigger company in terms of what they do. They have the handsets business. They sort of have their hands in a lot more, their fingers in a lot more pies. But yeah, it's still a massive amount. It still is a massive amount compared to what the European companies are spending.
Yeah, but the only thing to defend Huawei's position there is that if you have a look at it as a percentage of revenues, they're still larger.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't actually slice out into the individual business units, but as a percentage of total revenue, I think generally
they're higher.
Yeah, like 16-17%, whereas Nokia, Ericsson, ZTE were down sort of like 11, 12, 13%. There is clear daylight between the two. But then again, that doesn't designate the actual R&D spend to each of the individual units. They might be spending a shitload on smartphone cameras, for instance, rather than 5G base stations. So it's an imperfect comparison.
It is a scary amount, but we don't know where it's all going. That's the thing.
Yeah. One other thing I'll say on that, actually, there was some stuff I was looking at today. Well, yesterday I wrote a story covering an interview that Ren Zhengfei, the founder of Huawei, did with South China Morning Post, where he was talking about this R&D and basically saying that they're really chucking money at R&D right now because they've got this closing window of opportunity where they've got access to US components and US sort of partnerships. So they're really putting the accelerator right down to the floor on R&D right now. At least that's his narrative. And because he reckons there'll be a time not too far away when they can't do it. And then it's almost as if he anticipated it, which he may well have. But there was a story broken, I think, late yesterday or today by Reuters, where they're thinking of implementing the ban on Huawei access to US components. And this coincides with a time where Trump and Xi Jinping have actually been having a chat. They actually got on the phone to each other. Trump's been goading him. It's been all contentious because he's called coronavirus the Chinese virus. And
good impersonation.
And that's getting everyone all worked up, calling him racist, belligerent, and all that sort of thing. And then other people are going, yeah, but it did come from China, so what's the problem? Anyway, not going to get into that. But he's clearly doing it to wind him up. And yet the bloke still got on the phone and they're having a chat because obviously this is a global problem that we've got.
Well, he's so schizophrenic.
And then he tweets
slagging him off. Sorry, Scott. He's so schizophrenic. 1 minute he's kind of slagging them off, and the next minute he's like, "Yeah, good chat." It's like you never know what you're going to get 1 minute to the next. There's no.
Yeah, I think that's part of. If we give him credit for having a plan, I think that's part of his plan. He likes to keep people off balance.
Well, I think his method of running things, which is to do that and to sort of veer between extremes, is perhaps not what really needed. Not what's really needed at the moment, unfortunately. But yeah, he's still doing it, of course.
Yeah, Trump's gonna Trump.
Yeah.
But anyway, but you got him on the phone, whether or not that was going to happen anyway, and then tweeted like saying we had a tremendous conversation. That sort of up and down. Describe it.
Next time I want you to wear a blonde wig and do it.
Yeah, and suddenly they're best mates. But then Xi Jinping's been reported in the Chinese media of saying that the US has got to stop dicking about. So God, no one knows what's going on, but this would be a good time for the US and China to bury the hatchet a little bit. I do have a feeling that so much change is having to happen to the world because of this that it may well be a bit of a reset button for certain things. Flip side is human nature doesn't change. Everyone's going to go back once the panic's over. Everyone's going to go back to their own agendas and wanting to make money and wanting to further their own scene. You know, fingers crossed, they might just go, all right, let's just meet in the middle somewhere. China, you promised not to nick everyone's stuff, and we promised not to tweet out dickish stuff, and let's all get on with our lives. But yeah, let's see. But yes, the reason I went off on that tangent was a matter of the Huawei R&D. They do seem to be feeling that they've really better ramp it up now while they get the chance, and that window seems to be closing quite rapidly. So that's another reason why their R&D would be quite high. And then there's the thing that we've discussed before on the pod, the one we had Ray on. It's his last day today, by the way. Oh,
Yes.
Ray. That you know, they've got this sort of limitless credit line from Chinese banks, haven't they? So they can blow tons of money on R&D, and they're not a public company, so we don't even know to what extent they're balancing the books. So there's a lot of that vagueness there. But I don't think we question that they are spending a lot of money on R&D, and well, they should. Cool. Okay, so that's covered the three things I was going to chat about there. Looks like we're going to keep doing this kind of thing. So this was done on some kind of Google Meet. So we'll see what the output of this is and see whether we think Google Meet or Teams is better. But it seems more or less the same to me. Does it work for you guys?
Yeah, there's a few gaps, but that might just be the broadband today. It's been a bit dodgy in my neighbourhood, so I don't know whether you guys have been seeing that. But yeah,
no, you went a bit fuzzy once or twice, but it rescued.
Yeah.
And Jamie, you haven't cut out at all. It was being a bit moody for you earlier, but you're all right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and well, unless you guys have got anything else to add, I'll call it a day there.
Nothing from. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for persevering. We're doing our little bit, along with and so on, and thanks for continuing to listen, audience. Hope you enjoyed this one, and make sure you join us for the next one.